The glass doors of First National Bank swung open at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon. A young black woman stepped inside, her heels clicking softly against the polished marble floor. She wore a navy blue dress that looked expensive, and her hair was pulled back into a neat bun. In her hand, she carried a leather bag that probably cost more than most people made in a month. The bank was busy that Friday. People stood in lines waiting their turn. Some filled out forms at the tall desks near the windows. Others sat in chairs scrolling through their phones. The air conditioning hummed quietly, keeping the space cool despite the hot summer day outside. The young woman looked around for a moment, getting her bearings. She had been to this bank before, but not often. Usually she handled her banking online or through the mobile app. Today was different, though. Today she needed to deposit a check in person. A very large check. She walked toward the counter where 3 tellers were working. The line moved slowly. She took her place behind an elderly man who was arguing about a fee on his statement. The young woman waited patiently, not seeming bothered by the delay. Behind the counter, Patricia Henderson noticed her immediately. Patricia had worked at this bank for 20 years. She considered herself an expert at spotting trouble, and right now her instincts were telling her something was off about this girl. Patricia was in her early 50s with short brown hair and reading glasses that hung on a chain around her neck. She wore the standard bank uniform, a white blouse and black pants with her name tag pinned neatly to her chest. She had won Employee of the Month 7 times. She took her job very seriously. She watched the young woman from the corner of her eye while helping her current customer. Something about her just did not sit right. Maybe it was the expensive clothes. Maybe it was the confident way she stood. Patricia had seen a lot in her years at the bank, and she trusted her gut feelings. When the elderly man finally finished his transaction and walked away, the young woman stepped forward to the middle window where Patricia was stationed. She smiled politely. "Good afternoon," the young woman said. Her voice was calm and professional. "I need to make a deposit, please." Patricia did not return the smile. She simply nodded and held out her hand. "ID and deposit slip." The young woman reached into her bag and pulled out her wallet. She handed over her driver's license. Then she took out a check, carefully unfolding it. She placed it on the counter between them. Patricia picked up the license first, studying it closely. The name read Jasmine Stevens, age 26. The photo matched the woman standing in front of her. Everything looked legitimate, but Patricia was not convinced. Then she looked at the check. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw the amount. $50,000. The check was made out to Jasmine Stevens from something called the Community Health Foundation. It looked official, with watermarks and security features. But Patricia had seen fake checks before. "Good ones too. Where did you get this?" Patricia asked, her tone sharp. She held up the check, examining it under the light. Jasmine blinked, surprised by the question. "It's a grant payment for my nonprofit organization. The information is right there on the memo line." Patricia's lips pressed into a thin line. A nonprofit organization, sure, that's what they all said. She had heard every story in the book. Young people trying to cash fraudulent checks, thinking they could fool the bank. Well, not on her watch. "This is a very large amount," Patricia said slowly, as if speaking to a child. "We need to verify this before we can process it." "Of course," Jasmine replied, still calm. "That's fine. What do you need from me?" Other people in line were starting to pay attention now. Patricia's voice had gotten louder, though she probably did not realize it. The teller next to her, a young man named David, glanced over with concern. "I need you to tell me exactly how you came into possession of this check," Patricia demanded. She set the check down and crossed her arms over her chest. "Who gave it to you? What is this really for?" Jasmine's expression shifted slightly. The polite smile faded. She could feel the eyes of other customers on her back. She had been in situations like this before. Too many times before. But she had hoped it would be different here, at this professional establishment in the middle of the day. "As I said, it's a grant payment," Jasmine explained, keeping her voice level. "I run a medical nonprofit that serves low-income communities. The Community Health Foundation awarded us this grant 6 months ago. This is the second installment. The first check cleared without any issues back in March." Patricia scoffed. She actually scoffed, loud enough for people nearby to hear. "A medical nonprofit, you?" The way she said "you" made it clear what she meant. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten, but she refused to show any emotion. She had worked too hard, accomplished too much to let this woman's prejudice get under her skin. "Yes, me," Jasmine said firmly. "Now, are you going to process this deposit or not? I have all my account information right here. I've been banking with First National for 3 years." David, the young teller, spoke up quietly. "Patricia, maybe we should just—" "Stay out of this, David," Patricia snapped. She turned her attention back to Jasmine. "I'm going to need to speak with my manager about this. This check looks suspicious to me." "Suspicious how?" Jasmine asked. "It has all the proper security features. The routing number is valid. Everything checks out." But Patricia was already walking away from the counter, taking the check and ID with her. She marched toward the back office, her shoes clicking angrily against the floor. Jasmine stood there alone at the counter, with everyone in the bank now staring at her. She could feel their eyes. Some looked curious, some looked uncomfortable. A few looked judgmental, as if they had already decided she must be doing something wrong. Why else would the bank employee be acting this way? Jasmine took a deep breath and stepped aside from the counter. She found a seat in the waiting area and sat down, placing her bag on her lap. She would wait. She had done nothing wrong and she knew it. This check was completely legitimate. Her organization was real. Her credentials were impeccable. But none of that seemed to matter to Patricia Henderson, and Jasmine had a sinking feeling that this situation was about to get much worse before it got better. Patricia returned from the back office with a man in a gray suit following close behind her. This was Mr. Reynolds, the branch manager. He was tall and thin, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. He had been manager here for 5 years and generally tried to avoid confrontations. But Patricia had a way of making things sound urgent. She had told him there was a potential fraud situation happening at the counter. A suspicious individual trying to deposit a $50,000 check that just did not look right. She emphasized the amount again. $50,000. Mr. Reynolds knew he had to take this seriously. Bank fraud was no joke. They approached the waiting area where Jasmine sat. She looked up when she saw them coming. She stood preparing herself for whatever was about to happen. "Ma'am, I'm Mr. Reynolds, the branch manager," he said, trying to sound authoritative but mostly sounding nervous. "We're going to need to ask you some questions about this check." Jasmine nodded. "Of course. What would you like to know?" Patricia jumped in before Mr. Reynolds could continue. "We need to know where you really got this check. The truth this time." "I told you the truth," Jasmine replied, her patience wearing thin. "It's from the Community Health Foundation, a grant for my nonprofit organization. I can show you the award letter if that helps." "I have it on my phone." She reached for her phone, but Patricia held up a hand. "That won't be necessary. Anyone can fake a document on their phone these days." Mr. Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. He glanced at the check again, then at Jasmine's ID. "Miss Stevens, you have to understand. This is a very large sum of money. We have protocols we need to follow." "I completely understand protocols," Jasmine said, "but I'm a customer of this bank. I've had my account here for 3 years. I've never had any issues. You can look up my account history right now. I deposited a check from the same foundation 6 months ago for the same amount. Why is this suddenly a problem?" Patricia's face reddened. "Don't you take that tone with me, young lady. We're trying to protect this bank from criminals." The word hung in the air like a slap. Criminals. Several people nearby stopped what they were doing and turned to look. The line at the counter had grown longer, but nobody seemed to mind the wait now. This was much more interesting than their banking business. Jasmine felt her heart rate increase, but she kept her voice steady. "I'm not a criminal. I'm a doctor. I run a legitimate charitable organization. This check is real. You can call the Community Health Foundation right now and verify it. Their number's on the check." "A doctor?" Patricia let out a harsh laugh. "Really? That's the story you're going with?" Mr. Reynolds cleared his throat. "Patricia, maybe we should—" "She's lying," Patricia interrupted, speaking to Mr. Reynolds, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Look at her. Does she look like a doctor to you? I've been doing this job for 20 years. I know a scam when I see one." Jasmine's jaw tightened. She knew exactly what Patricia meant by "look at her." She had heard it before in different ways from different people. The assumptions, the prejudice, the immediate suspicion that someone like her could not possibly be successful, educated, accomplished. "I don't have to prove my profession to you," Jasmine said quietly but firmly. "I came here to make a simple deposit. I've provided my identification. I've explained where the check came from. If you want to verify it, make the phone call, but I'm not going to stand here and be treated like a criminal. Patricia turned to Mr. Reynolds, speaking as if Jasmine was not even there. This is exactly what they do. They come in here all dressed up, acting confident. They think if they look the part, we'll just hand over the money. Well, I'm not falling for it. Patricia, Mr. Reynolds said weakly, but he did not actually stop her. The older woman continued, her voice getting louder with each word. She probably stole this check. Or maybe she's working with someone who printed fake ones. These scammers are getting more sophisticated every day. But they're not smarter than me. A woman in line spoke up then. Excuse me, but shouldn't you be helping customers instead of harassing this young woman? Patricia whipped around. I'm doing my job, ma'am. Protecting your money and everyone else's. It looks like you're being rude, another customer added, an older man holding a deposit slip. Patricia's face grew even redder. She was not used to being challenged. She turned back to Jasmine, her eyes blazing. I want you to leave this bank right now. Take your fake check and go. I'm not leaving, Jasmine said calmly. I'm a customer here. I have every right to conduct my banking business. Not with a fraudulent check, you don't. It's not fraudulent. Call the foundation. Verify it. Patricia threw her hands up. Fine, you want to play games? We'll play games. She turned to Mr. Reynolds. Call the police. Let them sort this out. Mr. Reynolds blinked. The police? Patricia, don't you think that's a bit? Call them now. He hesitated, looking between Patricia and Jasmine. He should have put a stop to this. He should have de-escalated the situation. He should have actually verified the check through proper channels. But Patricia was so certain, so insistent. And she had been right about suspicious activities before. Maybe she was right this time too. All right, he finally said, pulling out his phone. I'll call them. Jasmine could not believe what was happening. She was being calm. She was being cooperative. She had done nothing wrong. And now the police were being called as if she were some kind of threat. This is ridiculous, she said. But her voice remained controlled. You're making a huge mistake. The only mistake here is you thinking you could walk into my bank and steal from us, Patricia shot back. People were taking out their phones now. Some were recording. Others were texting. Probably telling friends about the drama unfolding at First National Bank. This would be all over social media within the hour. Mr. Reynolds spoke into his phone, giving the bank's address to the dispatcher. Yes, we have a possible fraud situation. A woman trying to cash a suspicious check. We need officers here as soon as possible. When he hung up, he looked at Jasmine with what might have been pity, or maybe it was just discomfort. The police are on their way. You might want to take a seat. I've been sitting, Jasmine replied. I'll stand. Patricia positioned herself a few feet away, arms crossed, watching Jasmine like a guard watching a prisoner. She had a satisfied look on her face as if she had just won a great victory. She had protected her bank. She had caught a criminal. She would probably get another Employee of the Month award for this. David, the young teller, tried to get back to helping customers, but nobody wanted to leave now. They all stood there, watching and waiting. Some looked at Jasmine with sympathy. Others looked suspicious, as if Patricia's accusations had convinced them this well-dressed young woman must be up to no good. Jasmine stood in the middle of the bank lobby, surrounded by strangers waiting for the police to arrive. She thought about her morning. She had performed surgery at 6 a.m., saving a child's life. She had attended a board meeting for her nonprofit at noon. She had planned to stop by the bank quickly, then head back to the hospital for evening rounds. Instead, she was being treated like a criminal, because Patricia Henderson had looked at her and decided, based on nothing but her own biases, that Jasmine did not belong here. That someone who looked like her could not possibly have $50,000 legitimately. The minutes ticked by slowly. Patricia never moved from her spot, never took her eyes off Jasmine. Mr. Reynolds shuffled his feet awkwardly, checking his watch. The other customers whispered to each other, stealing glances. And Jasmine waited, knowing that when those police officers walked through the door, everything was about to change. She just hoped it would change in her favor. The bank had never been so quiet while being so full of people. Everyone seemed frozen in place, waiting for what would happen next. The usual sounds of the bank, the clicking of keyboards, the shuffle of papers, the quiet conversations, had all stopped. Now there was only tension hanging heavy in the air. Jasmine moved back to the chair she had been sitting in before. She placed her bag on the seat next to her and pulled out her phone. Her hands were steady even though inside she felt a storm of emotions. Anger, frustration, disappointment. But mostly, she just felt tired. Tired of this happening over and over again in different places, different situations. She opened her phone and sent a quick text to her assistant at the hospital. Going to be late for rounds. We'll explain later. She did not mention why. What would she even say? Stuck at bank because teller thinks I'm a criminal? It sounded absurd even in her head. Patricia stood about 10 feet away, positioned between Jasmine and the door. She had not moved since Mr. Reynolds made the call. She stood with her arms crossed, her eyes fixed on Jasmine as if the young woman might suddenly make a run for it. Every few seconds, Patricia would glance at the door, checking to see if the police had arrived yet. Mr. Reynolds had retreated behind the counter, pretending to busy himself with paperwork. But his hands shook slightly as he shuffled documents around. He kept adjusting his glasses, pushing them up his nose even when they had not slipped down. He was beginning to wonder if he had made the right decision, supporting Patricia's call to the police. But it was too late now. The call had been made. David, the young teller, helped a customer but kept looking over at Jasmine. He felt terrible about the whole situation. When the customer left, he leaned over to the teller next to him, a woman named Susan who had worked there for 10 years. "This doesn't feel right," he whispered. "That woman seems completely legitimate." Susan nodded slightly but said nothing. She had learned long ago not to question Patricia. The older woman had a way of making life difficult for anyone who disagreed with her. In the waiting area, an elderly woman sat 3 chairs down from Jasmine. She had been filling out a loan application when all this started. Now she could not concentrate on the paperwork. She kept stealing glances at Jasmine, then at Patricia, then back at her forms. Finally, she could not stay quiet any longer. "Excuse me, dear," she said softly to Jasmine. "Are you all right?" Jasmine looked up from her phone and managed a small smile. "I'm fine, thank you." "This all seems very unnecessary," the woman continued, keeping her voice low. "You've been nothing but polite this whole time." "I appreciate you saying that," Jasmine replied. Patricia heard the exchange and shot the elderly woman a sharp look. "Ma'am, please don't engage with her. This is a police matter now," the elderly woman bristled. "I'm 74 years old and I'll speak to whomever I please, thank you very much." Patricia's mouth opened and closed, but she said nothing. She turned her attention back to the door. A man in a business suit approached the counter, clearly frustrated. "Excuse me, but I have an important meeting in 20 minutes. Can someone help me with my transaction?" David waved him over. "I can help you, sir. What's going on here anyway?" the man asked, nodding toward where Jasmine sat. David hesitated. "Just a situation that's being resolved, sir. Let me see what you need today." But the man was not ready to drop it. He lowered his voice, but not enough that others could not hear. "Is it some kind of robbery or something?" "No, sir, nothing like that," David said quickly. "Now what can I help you with?" Meanwhile, more people had entered the bank, unaware of what had been happening. A young couple walked in, talking and laughing. They stopped short when they felt the strange atmosphere. The silence, the stares, the woman standing guard like a security officer. Is the bank open?" the young man asked nervously. "Yes, please come in," Mr. Reynolds called out, trying to sound normal and failing. "We can help you at the counter." The couple exchanged confused looks but got in line anyway. They whispered to each other, trying to figure out what was going on. Patricia checked her watch for the 5th time. The police had been called 12 minutes ago. They should be here any minute now. She felt completely justified in her actions. She had seen the way that young woman walked in here, all confidence and expensive clothes, acting like she belonged, acting like she was important. Patricia had worked hard her whole life. She had never had things handed to her. She had earned her position through dedication and vigilance. She protected this bank like it was her own, and she was not about to let some con artist make a fool of her. Jasmine scrolled through her phone, reading emails she had been meaning to respond to all week. One was from the Community Health Foundation, actually. They wanted to schedule a site visit to see how the grant money was being used. She almost laughed at the irony. The foundation trusted her with $50,000. They had vetted her organization thoroughly before approving the grant. But this bank teller had decided in 30 seconds that Jasmine was a criminal. A text message came through from her best friend. "Still on for dinner tonight?" Jasmine typed back. Might have to reschedule. Long story. Her phone buzzed again almost immediately. Everything okay? She did not respond. How could she explain this in a text message? How could she explain that she was sitting in a bank, waiting for police to arrive because a teller refused to believe she was who she said she was? The door chimed as another customer left. Then another. Some people were getting uncomfortable with the situation and deciding to come back another day. Others stayed, curious to see how this would play out. A few had their phones out recording video, though they tried to be discreet about it. Susan, the teller, finally spoke up. Patricia, maybe we should just process the check and let her go. The police don't need to be involved in this. Patricia whirled around. Don't you start too, Susan, I know what I'm doing. That check is fake. I'm sure of it. But what if it's not? Susan asked quietly. It is, Patricia insisted. You'll see. When the police get here and run her information, we'll find out who she really is. Probably has warrants out for her arrest. These people always do, these people. The words made several customers shift uncomfortably. David closed his eyes briefly, wishing he worked anywhere else right now. Mr. Reynolds pretended he had not heard, but his face had gone pale. Jasmine heard it too. Of course she did. Patricia had not exactly whispered. But Jasmine did not react. She had learned long ago that responding to comments like that only made things worse, so she sat quietly, maintaining her dignity, waiting for this nightmare to end. The elderly woman who had spoken to Jasmine earlier stood up. She walked to the counter directly to Mr. Reynolds. I need to speak with you privately. Mr. Reynolds looked relieved to have an excuse to move. He stepped away from the counter and walked with the woman to the side of the lobby. That employee of yours is way out of line, the elderly woman said firmly. I've been banking here for 30 years. I've never seen anyone treated so poorly. That young woman has done nothing wrong. She's been patient and polite while being accused of crimes. You should be ashamed of yourself for allowing this to continue. Mr. Reynolds opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, the bank's glass doors swung open. 2 police officers stepped inside, their uniforms crisp and official. Their utility belts creaked slightly as they walked. Everyone in the bank turned to look at them. Patricia's face lit up with triumph. Officers, thank goodness you're here. That's her right there. The one trying to defraud the bank. She pointed directly at Jasmine, her finger extended like an accusation. The officers looked in the direction Patricia was pointing. They both stopped walking. Their expressions changed from professional alertness to something else entirely. Something that looked a lot like shock. Officer Williams, a black man in his 40s with kind eyes, stared at Jasmine. His partner, Officer Chen, an Asian woman in her 30s, brought her hand up to her mouth in surprise. They looked at each other, a silent communication passing between them. Patricia, still basking in her perceived victory, did not notice their reactions. She continued talking, her voice loud and self-righteous. She came in here with a check for $50,000. Claimed it was from some foundation for some non-profit. But I know a scam when I see one. She was very insistent, very aggressive. I felt threatened, but the officers were not listening to Patricia anymore. They were moving toward Jasmine, but not with the stern, authoritative approach Patricia had expected. Officer Williams was smiling, actually smiling, and Officer Chen looked like she was about to cry. Officer Williams reached Jasmine first, and before Patricia could continue her accusations, he did something that made everyone in the bank freeze. He smiled warmly and spoke with genuine respect in his voice. Dr. Stevens, he said, his tone completely different from what anyone expected. Is everything all right here? The bank went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the marble floor. Patricia's mouth, which had been open and ready to continue her complaint, slowly closed. Her eyebrows drew together in confusion. Dr. Stevens, doctor? Jasmine stood up from her chair, and despite everything she had just been through, she managed a genuine smile. Hello, Officer Williams. Officer Chen. I'm afraid there's been a bit of a misunderstanding. Officer Chen stepped forward, her expression a mixture of concern and disbelief. A misunderstanding? Dr. Stevens, what happened? Are you okay? Patricia finally found her voice again. Wait, you know her? Officer Williams turned to look at Patricia, and the warmth in his expression cooled considerably. Yes, we know her. This is Dr. Jasmine Stevens. She's a pediatric surgeon at City General Hospital. The words hit the bank like a bomb. Several people gasped. David, the young teller, closed his eyes and shook his head. Susan put her hand over her mouth. Mr. Reynolds went even paler than before, if that was possible. The customers who had been recording on their phones moved in closer, making sure they captured every moment. Patricia stammered. But she came in with a suspicious check. For $50,000. She said something about a non-profit, but I thought— You thought what? Officer Williams asked, his voice hardening. What exactly made you think Dr. Stevens was doing something wrong? Patricia looked around, suddenly aware that everyone was staring at her. She tried to gather her thoughts, but they were scattered like leaves in the wind. The amount was very large, and she just walked in acting like what? Officer Chen pressed. Like she had every right to conduct her banking business? Because she does. Jasmine held up her hand gently. Officers, it's all right. Let me explain what happened. She turned to include Patricia and Mr. Reynolds in her words. I came in to deposit a check from the Community Health Foundation. It's a grant payment for my nonprofit organization. We provide free medical care to underserved communities throughout the city. Officer Chen nodded enthusiastically. My daughter was one of her patients. 3 months ago, Maya needed emergency surgery. Dr. Stevens operated on her. She saved my little girl's life. Her voice cracked slightly on the last words. Officer Williams put a supportive hand on his partner's shoulder. He turned to address the growing crowd of onlookers. Dr. Stevens runs the Hope Medical Initiative, he explained. It's a charity that provides free health care to families who can't afford it. They have mobile clinics that go into underserved neighborhoods. They've helped hundreds of people in our community. Patricia felt like the floor was dropping out from under her. She looked at the check still in her hand and saw it with new eyes. The Community Health Foundation, a legitimate organization, a grant payment, all real, all legitimate. She had been so certain. I didn't know, Patricia whispered. You didn't ask, Jasmine said quietly. You assumed. Mr. Reynolds finally stepped forward, his face red with embarrassment. Dr. Stevens, I sincerely apologize. This is completely unacceptable. We should have verified the check properly instead of jumping to conclusions. Conclusions based on what? The elderly woman who had defended Jasmine spoke up from her seat. Based on the color of her skin? Because I was sitting right here and I saw how you treated her from the start. Patricia's face flushed. That's not— I would never. It wasn't about that. But everyone in the bank knew it was exactly about that. They had seen how Patricia looked at Jasmine from the moment she walked in. They had heard the suspicion in her voice, the accusations, the assumptions, and they had watched how quickly Patricia had jumped to calling the police instead of following normal procedures. Officer Williams addressed Mr. Reynolds directly. Sir, we were actually at an event honoring Dr. Stevens just last week. The mayor presented her with a community service award for her medical work. She's been featured in the newspaper. She's given talks at schools. She's one of the most respected doctors in this city. Each word was like a hammer blow to Patricia's pride. She had been so certain she was protecting the bank, so certain she was catching a criminal, and instead she had humiliated a respected doctor in front of dozens of witnesses. A man in the line spoke up. I knew I recognized her. I saw her on the local news last month. They did a whole segment about her nonprofit. My sister's kid goes to the free clinic, another customer added. Dr. Stevens and her team are amazing. They helped my nephew when he had pneumonia and we couldn't afford a regular doctor. More voices joined in, people suddenly remembering where they had seen Jasmine before. The puzzle pieces were clicking into place for everyone except Patricia, who stood there wishing the floor would swallow her whole. Officer Chen pulled out her phone. Here, let me show you. She scrolled through her photos and held up the screen. It showed her with her daughter, and there was Jasmine in her surgical scrubs smiling beside the little girl's hospital bed. This was taken the day after Maya's surgery. Dr. Stevens came to check on her even though it was her day off. Jasmine smiled at the photo. Maya is such a brave girl. How is she doing? She's perfect, Officer Chen said, her eyes getting misty. Running around, playing soccer, being a normal 8-year-old. Thanks to you. The contrast was stark and painful. On one side, a bank employee who had seen a successful young black woman and immediately assumed the worst. On the other side, police officers showing genuine respect and gratitude to that same woman. The irony was not lost on anyone present. Patricia tried one more time to defend herself. The check was for such a large amount. We have to be careful about fraud. I was just doing my job. Your job is to serve customers, not harass them, the elderly woman said sharply. I've worked in customer service for 40 years, young lady, and you violated every principle of good service today. David finally spoke up from behind the counter. Patricia, we have procedures for verifying checks. You could have called the foundation. You could have checked Dr. Stevens' account history. You could have asked the manager to verify through our system. You didn't do any of that. You just called the police, Mr. Reynolds nodded reluctantly. He's right. We have protocols for this exact situation. None of them involve immediately calling law enforcement. Officer Williams crossed his arms. Speaking of which, who made the call to 911? Because this is not a police matter. This is a customer trying to do their banking. I authorized the call, Mr. Reynolds admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. On what grounds? Officer Chen asked. Mr. Reynolds had no answer. There were no grounds. Just assumptions and prejudice wrapped up in concerns about fraud. Jasmine took a deep breath. The initial relief of being recognized was fading, replaced by the full weight of what had just happened. She had been humiliated, accused, treated like a criminal, in front of all these people, some of whom had recorded it on their phones. This would be on social media within the hour. Her colleagues would see it. Her patients' families would see it. Everyone would know that despite her education, her position, her accomplishments, she could still be treated this way. I appreciate you both being here, Jasmine said to the officers, but I think we need to resolve the actual banking issue. I still need to make this deposit. Patricia looked down at the check in her hand as if it had transformed into a snake. Of course, yes, right away. She moved toward the counter with shaking hands, but Jasmine held up her hand. Actually, I don't think I want to complete my transaction with you. Patricia stopped, stung by the words but unable to argue. David stepped forward immediately. Dr. Stevens, I would be honored to help you. Please come to my window. Jasmine picked up her bag and walked to David's station. Officer Williams and Officer Chen followed, standing supportively nearby. Patricia remained frozen in place, the check still in her trembling hand. As David began processing the deposit correctly, using all the proper verification procedures, Officer Williams turned to Mr. Reynolds. We're going to need to file a report about this incident. Dr. Stevens may want to pursue this matter further. Mr. Reynolds nodded miserably. He knew this was going to be a disaster for the bank, for Patricia, for him, and they all deserved it. The whole bank watched as David completed the transaction efficiently and respectfully. When he handed Jasmine her receipt, she thanked him sincerely. Then she turned to face the crowd of onlookers. I want everyone here to know something, she said, her voice clear and strong. This isn't the first time something like this has happened to me. And it probably won't be the last. But I will not be made to feel ashamed for being successful. I will not apologize for being educated. I will not shrink myself to make others comfortable. People began to applaud. It started with the elderly woman and spread through the bank. Even some of the employees joined in, though Patricia notably did not. Jasmine walked toward the door, Officer Williams and Officer Chen on either side of her. As she passed Patricia, she stopped and looked the older woman directly in the eyes. Outside the bank, Jasmine stopped on the sidewalk and took a deep breath of fresh air. The afternoon sun was still bright, and people walked past going about their normal Friday business, completely unaware of what had just happened inside those glass doors. Officer Williams and Officer Chen had followed her out, concern written across both their faces. Dr. Stevens, are you sure you're okay? Officer Chen asked, touching Jasmine's arm gently. That was really awful in there. Jasmine nodded, but her composure was starting to crack now that she was away from all those staring eyes. I'm fine. I'm just tired. So tired of this. Officer Williams looked back at the bank, anger clear in his expression. What that woman did in there was wrong. Plain and simple. You were profiled. You were discriminated against. And we're witnesses to it. I know, Jasmine said softly, but what can I really do? File a complaint? Sue the bank? I have patients to take care of. I have a nonprofit to run. I don't have time to fight every battle. Officer Chen shook her head firmly. With all due respect, Dr. Stevens, this isn't just about you. It's about every person of color who walks into that bank. If you don't say something, if you don't push back, they'll keep doing this to others. People who might not have officers like us who can vouch for them. The words hit home. Jasmine knew Officer Chen was right. She thought about her patients, young black and brown kids who came to her clinic. What kind of world would they grow up in if people like Patricia faced no consequences for their prejudice? You're right, Jasmine said, straightening her shoulders. You're absolutely right. What do I need to do? Officer Williams pulled out a small notebook. First, we file an official report. We document exactly what happened, including everything we witnessed. Then you need to contact the bank's corporate office. A branch manager's apology isn't enough. This needs to go higher. I can also connect you with a lawyer friend of mine, Officer Chen added. She specializes in discrimination cases. Just to have someone in your corner who knows the law. Jasmine smiled gratefully at them both. Thank you, really. I don't know what would have happened if you two hadn't shown up. Officer Williams returned the smile. We're glad we could help. But Dr. Stevens, you need to understand something. You didn't need us to prove you're a good person. You didn't need us to validate your worth. You've done nothing wrong here, nothing. I know that in my head, Jasmine replied. But in the moment when everyone's staring at you, when someone's calling you a criminal, it's hard to remember. They spent the next 20 minutes standing on that sidewalk going over the details of what happened. Officer Williams took careful notes, writing down exact times, exact words that were said, the names of witnesses. Officer Chen took photos of the bank exterior, noting the time and date. Inside the bank, chaos had erupted the moment Jasmine left. Mr. Reynolds had rushed to his office and was now on the phone with the regional director, trying to explain the situation before it exploded further. But he was too late. 3 people had already posted videos on social media. The clips were spreading fast. Patricia sat at the break room table, her head in her hands. Susan had brought her water, but it sat untouched. David stood in the doorway, not sure what to say. I can't believe this happened, Patricia mumbled. I was so sure. Sure of what? David asked, his voice harder than usual. You didn't even try to verify anything. You just saw her and decided she was a criminal. It wasn't like that, Patricia protested weakly. Then what was it like? Susan asked quietly. Because from where I was standing, you treated her terribly from the first second she walked up to the counter. Patricia wanted to argue, but she could not find the words. She replayed the scene in her mind. The way she had looked at Jasmine, the assumptions she had made, the tone of her voice, and she felt sick. I didn't mean to, she started but trailed off. Because maybe she did mean to. Maybe all those years of thinking she was protecting the bank had really just been years of acting on her own biases. It was an uncomfortable truth to face. Mr. Reynolds appeared in the doorway, his face grave. Patricia, I need you to gather your things. You're suspended, effective immediately. Pending investigation. Patricia's head snapped up. Suspended? But I was doing my job. No, Mr. Reynolds said firmly, finding his backbone too late. You were discriminating against a customer. The regional director has already seen the videos. They're everywhere online. This is a public relations nightmare. And more importantly, it was wrong. What you did was completely wrong. Tears filled Patricia's eyes, but whether they were from remorse or self-pity, no one could tell. She stood slowly, walked to her locker, and removed her personal items. The bank that had been her second home for 20 years suddenly felt foreign and hostile. As she walked through the lobby toward the exit, customers and co-workers alike watched her go. No one spoke to her. No one said goodbye. The elderly woman who had spoken up earlier caught her eye and just shook her head sadly. Outside, Jasmine was finishing up with the officers when her phone rang. She glanced at the screen and saw it was the hospital. I need to take this, she told the officers. Hello? Dr. Stevens, it's Dr. Martinez from the ER. We have a 7-year-old who came in with acute appendicitis. His appendix is about to rupture. We need you here right away. All thoughts of the bank incident vanished instantly. I'm 20 minutes away. Prep him for surgery. I'm coming now. She hung up and looked at the officers apologetically. I have to go. Emergency surgery? Officer Williams nodded. Of course. We have everything we need for now. I'll email you the report tonight. You can review it and sign it whenever you have time. Officer Chen pulled her into a quick hug. Thank you for everything you do, Dr. Stevens. For my Maya and for everyone else you help. Jasmine hugged her back, then hurried to her car. As she drove toward the hospital, her mind shifted gears completely. A child needed her. A family was scared and waiting. This was what mattered. This was her purpose. But in the back of her mind, she knew this wasn't over. The videos would spread. News outlets would pick up the story. There would be interviews, statements, probably more confrontations. The simple act of trying to deposit a check had turned into something much bigger. She pulled into the hospital parking lot and grabbed her white coat from the back seat. As she walked through the automatic doors, several staff members called out greetings. Here in these halls, everyone knew who she was. Here she was respected without question. Here she could just be Dr. Stevens, a surgeon who saved lives. A nurse met her at the elevator. The boys in OR prep. Parents are with him. They're really scared. I'll talk to them, Jasmine said, pressing the button for the surgical floor. When she entered the pre-op area, she saw a young couple standing next to a gurney where a small boy lay, trying to be brave despite obvious pain. The mother was crying. The father held her hand tightly. Jasmine approached with a warm, confident smile. Hi there. I'm Dr. Stevens. I'm going to take care of your son. The mother looked up, tears streaming down her face. Please help him. He's all we have. I promise you, Jasmine said, taking the woman's hand. I'm going to do everything I can. Your son is going to be fine. I'm very good at what I do. And she was. Despite everything that had happened that afternoon, despite the humiliation and the anger and the frustration, Jasmine was an excellent surgeon. She had trained for years. She had worked countless hours. She had earned her position through skill and dedication. No bank teller's prejudice could take that away from her. 2 hours later, Jasmine emerged from the operating room and found the parents in the waiting room. They jumped up when they saw her. The surgery went perfectly, Jasmine told them, pulling down her surgical mask so they could see her smile. I got the appendix out before it ruptured. Your son is going to be just fine. He'll be sore for a few days, but he'll make a full recovery. The mother collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing with relief. The father shook Jasmine's hand repeatedly, thanking her over and over. You saved our boy, he kept saying. You saved him. Jasmine felt the weight of the day finally lift a little. This was why she had gone into medicine. This was why she worked so hard. This was what made everything else worthwhile. As she walked back to the locker room to change, her phone buzzed with notification after notification. The story from the bank was everywhere. Local news had picked it up. People were sharing the videos. Her name was trending on social media. She scrolled through some of the comments. Most were supportive, expressing outrage at how she had been treated. But some were ugly, saying she had played the race card, that she was making a big deal out of nothing, that the bank teller was just doing her job. Jasmine put her phone away. She was too exhausted to deal with it all right now. She had saved a child's life today. She had comforted scared parents. She had done her job well, as she always did. The bank incident was unfortunate. It was painful. It was infuriating. But it would not define her. She would not let it. Tomorrow she would deal with the aftermath. She would make her complaints official. She would push for consequences and policy changes. She would use her platform to speak out about what had happened. But tonight she just wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and remember that she was Dr. Jasmine Stevens, not a criminal, not a fraud, not someone who had to justify her existence, just a doctor who saved lives. And that was enough. The next morning, Jasmine woke to her phone ringing at 6:30. It was a Saturday, her one day to sleep in, but she had a feeling this would be happening a lot today. She glanced at the screen and saw it was a number she did not recognize. Hello? She answered cautiously. Dr. Stevens. This is Rebecca Walsh from Channel 7 News. I was hoping to get a comment from you about what happened at First National Bank yesterday. Jasmine sat up in bed, rubbing her eyes. How did you get my personal number? I'm a reporter, Dr. Stevens. It's my job. Now, about yesterday. I have no comment at this time, Jasmine said firmly and ended the call. Before she could set the phone down, it rang again. Another reporter. Then another. By 7 a.m., she had received 12 calls from various news outlets. Her voicemail was full. Her email inbox had hundreds of messages. Her social media mentions had exploded overnight. She finally turned her phone on silent and got out of bed. She made coffee and sat at her kitchen table, laptop open in front of her. The videos from the bank were everywhere. Every major news site had covered the story. Prominent doctor racially profiled at bank, read one headline. Bank employee calls police on surgeon making legitimate deposit, said another. The comment sections were filled with thousands of responses. People shared their own stories of being discriminated against. Others defended Patricia, saying she was just being cautious. The debate raged online, with Jasmine's face and name at the center of it all. Her doorbell rang. Jasmine walked to the door and peered through the peephole. A news van was parked outside her house. A reporter stood on her porch with a cameraman behind her. Jasmine did not answer. She closed the curtains and returned to her coffee. By 9 a.m., her phone showed 42 missed calls. She scrolled through, looking for anything urgent. There were several from the hospital administration, one from the mayor's office, 3 from Officer Chen, and 1 from a number simply labeled First National Bank Corporate. She called Officer Chen back first. Dr. Stevens, thank goodness, the officer answered immediately. Are you okay? Have you seen the news? I've seen it, Jasmine confirmed. It's overwhelming. My captain wants to meet with you. The incident has gotten a lot of attention, and there are questions about how the call was handled. They want to make sure everything was documented properly. That's fine, Jasmine said. I also need to return a call to the bank's corporate office. Good, Officer Chen said firmly. Make them squirm. What happened to you was inexcusable. After they hung up, Jasmine stared at the corporate number for a long moment before dialing. It was answered on the first ring. Dr. Stevens, thank you so much for returning my call. My name is James Morrison, and I'm the Regional Director for First National Bank. I cannot express how deeply sorry I am for what you experienced yesterday. His voice was smooth, practiced, the voice of someone who handled public relations disasters for a living. I appreciate the apology, Jasmine said carefully, but I'm sure you understand that an apology isn't enough. Absolutely, Morrison agreed quickly. Which is why I'd like to meet with you today if possible. At your convenience, of course. We need to discuss what happened and what steps we're taking to ensure this never happens again. What steps have you taken so far? Jasmine asked. Morrison cleared his throat. Patricia Henderson has been terminated from her position effective this morning. Mr. Reynolds, the branch manager, has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation. We're reviewing our training protocols and implementing mandatory anti-bias training for all employees at all branches. Jasmine felt a complicated mix of emotions. She had not wanted anyone to lose their job, not really, but she also knew that actions had consequences. Patricia's behavior was unacceptable and the bank needed to send a clear message. I'll meet with you, Jasmine said, but I'm bringing my lawyer. Of course, Morrison said. Whatever makes you comfortable. How about 2 p.m. at our downtown corporate offices? After agreeing to the meeting, Jasmine called Officer Chen back to get the contact information for the discrimination lawyer. Then she called the lawyer, a woman named Sandra Chen, no relation to the officer, who agreed to meet her at 1:30 to prepare. The morning passed in a blur. Jasmine showered and dressed in a sharp gray suit, armor for the battle ahead. She ignored the reporters still camped outside her house and drove to Sandra Chen's office through a back route. The lawyer was a woman in her 50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper mind. She listened carefully as Jasmine recounted every detail of what had happened at the bank. This is a clear-cut case of discrimination, Sandra said when Jasmine finished. You have witnesses. You have video evidence. You have police officers who can testify to what they saw and heard. The bank knows they're in serious trouble. I don't want to drag this out, Jasmine said. I just want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. Sandra nodded. I understand. But Dr. Stevens, you need to understand your position here. The bank is terrified right now. The story has gone viral. Their stock price dropped 2% this morning. They're facing a potential lawsuit, federal investigations into their practices, and a public relations nightmare. You have leverage. We can use that to force real, meaningful change. They spent an hour preparing for the meeting, going over what to expect, what to demand, what to absolutely not agree to. When they arrived at the bank's corporate offices, they were immediately escorted to a large conference room on the top floor. James Morrison was there, along with 3 other executives, 2 lawyers, and someone who was introduced as the Chief Diversity Officer. They all stood when Jasmine entered, looking uncomfortable and nervous. Morrison approached with his hand extended. Dr. Stevens, thank you for coming. Please sit down. The meeting lasted 3 hours. Morrison started with another apology, more polished and formal than the one on the phone. Then he presented their proposed action plan. We're implementing comprehensive anti-bias training for all employees. he explained, sliding a folder across the table to Jasmine. Every branch will undergo a review of their customer service protocols. We're creating a new complaint system specifically for discrimination incidents, and we're making a significant donation to your nonprofit organization. Sandra leaned forward. How significant? $250,000, Morrison said. Jasmine's eyes widened despite herself. That was 5 times the grant payment she had been trying to deposit. But Sandra was not impressed. Let's talk about the real issues here. Your training programs need to be ongoing, not a one-time seminar that people sleep through. Your complaint system needs to have teeth, actual consequences for employees who discriminate, and you need to diversify your workforce, particularly in management positions. The bank's lawyers shifted uncomfortably. One of them spoke up. We're prepared to meet most of these demands, but we need Dr. Stevens to sign a non-disclosure agreement. This needs to be resolved quietly. No, Jasmine said firmly. Absolutely not. I won't be silenced, Sandra smiled slightly. My client has no intention of signing an NDA. The public has a right to know how this is resolved. Transparency is part of accountability. The meeting went back and forth with both sides negotiating terms. Finally, they reached an agreement. The bank would implement all the changes Sandra demanded with quarterly reports to be made public. They would increase the donation to Jasmine's nonprofit to $300,000. They would issue a public apology, not just to Jasmine but to any customer who had experienced discrimination at their branches, and they would create a scholarship fund for students from underserved communities who wanted to pursue careers in medicine or finance. There's one more thing, Jasmine said as they were preparing to sign the agreement. I want Patricia Henderson to receive severance pay and access to counseling. What she did was wrong, but destroying her life isn't the answer. If she's willing to learn and grow, she deserves that chance. Morrison looked surprised, but he nodded. That's very generous of you, Dr. Stevens. We'll make sure she has those resources available. As Jasmine and Sandra left the building, the lawyer shook her head in admiration. You're a better person than most, Dr. Stevens. Not many people would show compassion to someone who humiliated them. I'm not doing it for her, Jasmine said quietly. I'm doing it because I believe people can change, and because hate breeds more hate. Someone has to break the cycle. They stepped outside to find a crowd of reporters waiting. Jasmine had known this was coming. She stood on the steps of the corporate building and cleared her throat. I have a brief statement, she said, and the crowd went silent. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust forward. What happened to me at First National Bank was wrong. It was discriminatory, humiliating, and completely unacceptable. But I'm not the first person this has happened to, and I won't be the last. Racial profiling happens every day in banks, in stores, in schools, and hospitals. It happens to people who don't have police officers to vouch for them. It happens to people who don't have lawyers to fight for them. It happens to people whose stories never make the news. She paused, making eye contact with the cameras. I'm using my platform and my privilege to demand change. Not just at one bank, but everywhere. We need to look at our biases, our assumptions, our prejudices. We need to do better. All of us. The bank has agreed to make significant changes, and I'll be watching to make sure they follow through. But this isn't just about one bank or one employee. This is about creating a world where people are judged by their character and their actions, not by the color of their skin. The reporters erupted with questions. But Jasmine simply said, that's all I have to say right now. Thank you. She walked to her car, Sandra beside her, and drove away from the chaos. Her phone buzzed with a text from Officer Chen. Saw your statement on TV. You're amazing. Maya wants to be just like you when she grows up. Jasmine smiled at that. Maybe something good could come from all this pain after all. Maybe some little girl watching the news would see her standing up for herself and learn that she could do the same. Maybe some young person would be inspired to become a doctor, or a lawyer, or anything they dreamed of, knowing that they deserved respect no matter what they looked like. As she drove home, Jasmine thought about what came next. The news would die down eventually. Life would return to normal. She would go back to her surgeries, her nonprofit, her quiet life. But the world had changed a little bit. Maybe not enough. Maybe not as much as it needed to. But change had happened, and that was something. She pulled into her driveway and noticed the news vans were gone. She walked into her house, kicked off her heels, and finally let herself feel the exhaustion of the past 24 hours. Her phone rang again. This time it was her mother. "Baby, I saw you on the news," her mother said, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so proud of you. So proud." "Thanks, Mom," Jasmine said, her own voice breaking a little. "Your grandmother would have been proud too. The way you stood up for yourself. The way you handled everything with such grace." They talked for a while, and when Jasmine hung up, she felt lighter somehow, vindicated, not because the bank had apologized or made donations or fired Patricia, but because she had refused to be made small. She had demanded her dignity, and she had won. 6 months had passed since that Friday afternoon at First National Bank. The summer heat had given way to fall, and then winter had settled over the city. Life had moved forward as it always does, but the ripples from that one incident continued to spread outward in ways Jasmine never could have anticipated. She sat in her office at City General Hospital, reviewing patient charts before her afternoon surgeries. Through her window, she could see snow falling gently on the parking lot below. Her phone buzzed with a reminder about a meeting at 3 p.m. Not a medical meeting, something different. First National Bank had invited her to speak at their quarterly progress report. They had been true to their word, implementing every change they had promised. Today, Jasmine would see the results for herself. She arrived at the bank's corporate offices a few minutes early. The same conference room where she had negotiated 6 months ago now looked different. The walls displayed posters about diversity and inclusion. A banner read, "Building a Better Bank for Everyone." James Morrison greeted her warmly. "Dr. Stevens, thank you for coming. We're honored to have you here." The room filled with branch managers from across the region, diversity trainers, executives, and several employees who had gone through the new training programs. Morrison began the presentation, showing statistics and data. Discrimination complaints had been taken seriously, investigated thoroughly, and resulted in actual consequences when warranted. 3 more employees had been let go for similar behavior. 7 had been given additional training and counseling. Customer satisfaction scores among minority customers had improved by 40%. "But the most important changes are the ones we can't measure with numbers," Morrison said, clicking to a new slide. "We've changed our culture. We've had difficult conversations. We've confronted our biases." He invited several employees to share their experiences. A young black teller talked about how much safer she felt at work now, knowing that discrimination would not be tolerated. An older white manager admitted that the training had forced him to examine assumptions he did not even know he had. A Latina branch manager described how the changes had improved not just the workplace but her relationship with her community. When it was Jasmine's turn to speak, she stood and looked around the room. Some faces looked genuinely moved. Others looked uncomfortable, which was probably a good thing. Growth was supposed to be uncomfortable. 6 months ago, I walked into one of your branches as a customer and was treated like a criminal, Jasmine began. It was humiliating. It was painful. And it was unfortunately not surprising. I had experienced similar treatment before, in different places, different situations. But what happened afterward, that was different. She paused, gathering her thoughts. You could have done what many corporations do. Issue a generic apology, fire the person involved, and hope it all blew over. Instead, you chose to actually change. You looked at your systems, your training, your culture. You made it uncomfortable for a while, and that's good. Change should be uncomfortable. She walked around the table as she spoke, making eye contact with different people. But here's what I want you to understand. This work is never finished. Bias training isn't something you do once and check off a list. It's an ongoing process. Every day you have to choose to see people as individuals. Every day you have to question your assumptions. Every day you have to do better than the day before. The room was silent, everyone hanging on her words. I'm grateful for the changes you've made. The donation to my nonprofit has allowed us to open 2 new mobile clinics. We've served over 3,000 patients who otherwise would have had no access to health care. That money has literally saved lives. So thank you for that. Morrison nodded, looking emotional. But don't thank me for pushing you to change. This should have already been happening. I shouldn't have had to be humiliated on camera for you to realize there was a problem. So while I appreciate what you've done, I also challenge you to keep going. Keep learning. Keep growing. Keep making your employees and your customers feel valued and respected, regardless of what they look like. When the meeting ended, several people approached Jasmine to thank her and share their own stories. A young manager pulled her aside. Dr. Stevens, I need to tell you something. I'm the one who took over Patricia Henderson's old branch. When I first started, I found a drawer full of complaint cards that had never been filed. Complaints from Black and Latino customers about how they were treated. Patricia had hidden them. Jasmine felt a chill. How many? 17. Over the course of 3 years. 17 people who had been treated poorly and complained, only to have their complaints buried. 17 people who thought no one cared. Jasmine felt vindicated in pushing for change, but also sad for all those people whose voices had been silenced. I filed every single one of those complaints. The manager continued. Contacted every customer I could reach and apologized personally. Most were shocked that anyone followed up. A few cried. They all thought their complaints had been ignored. Thank you for doing that, Jasmine said, touching his arm. That takes courage. As Jasmine left the corporate offices, she thought about Patricia Henderson. She had heard through Officer Chen that Patricia had taken the severance money and enrolled in counseling as Jasmine had requested. She had also started volunteering at a community center, working with diverse populations. Whether the change was genuine or just for show, Jasmine did not know, but she hoped it was real. The next stop on her day was her nonprofit office. The Hope Medical Initiative had grown significantly in 6 months. The bank's donation had been transformative, but the publicity from the incident had brought in other donations too. Corporate sponsors, individual donors, grant opportunities. The organization that had operated on a shoestring budget now had resources to expand their mission. Her assistant director, a young woman named Christina, met her at the door. Dr. Stevens, you need to see the new clinic space. The contractors finished yesterday. They walked through the new facility together. Exam rooms, a small surgical suite for minor procedures, a pharmacy, a waiting room with toys for children. It was everything Jasmine had dreamed of when she started this organization 3 years ago. We're booked solid for the next 2 months, Christina said, showing her the appointment schedule. Word has spread. People are coming from all over the city. Jasmine felt tears prick her eyes. This was what mattered, not the news coverage or the social media debates or the corporate apologies. This, people getting health care, families being helped, lives being saved. Her phone buzzed. A text from Officer Chen. Maya's school is doing a career day next month. Would you be willing to come talk to the kids? Jasmine smiled and typed back, I'd love to. That evening, Jasmine attended a community meeting about healthcare access. She had been invited as a guest speaker, but mostly she just wanted to listen. The room was full of activists, healthcare workers, patients, and concerned citizens. They talked about systemic issues, about how to create lasting change, about how to ensure everyone had access to quality healthcare, regardless of their income or insurance status. A young Black woman, probably in her early 20s, raised her hand during the question period. Dr. Stevens, I saw what happened to you at that bank. I've had similar things happen to me. How do you not get discouraged? How do you keep going? Jasmine thought carefully before answering. I do get discouraged sometimes. What happened at the bank was just one incident, but it represented something much bigger, a pattern of treatment that many of us face regularly. And yes, it's exhausting. Yes, it's frustrating. But I keep going because giving up would mean letting the bigots win. She leaned forward, speaking directly to the young woman. I keep going because I have patients who need me, because I have a purpose that's bigger than anyone's prejudice, because I know that my grandmother fought battles so I could have opportunities she never had, and I have to keep fighting so that the next generation has even more opportunities than I did. That's how change happens, one generation pushing the door open a little wider for the next. The room erupted in applause. After the meeting, dozens of people came up to thank her, to share their stories, to ask for advice. Jasmine stayed late, talking to everyone who wanted to speak with her. She gave out her email address, connected people with resources, listened to their struggles. When she finally got home at 10 p.m., she was exhausted, but fulfilled. She made tea and sat on her couch, scrolling through the news on her tablet. The story about the bank incident no longer made headlines. Other issues, other stories had taken its place in the news cycle. But the changes remained. The impact remained. She opened her laptop and began writing an email to James Morrison. She wanted to follow up on a few things from the meeting, particularly about hiring practices in management positions. She wanted to make sure the momentum did not slow down just because the cameras had moved on. A notification popped up. Someone had tagged her in a post. She clicked on it and found a photo of a young black girl wearing a white coat and a toy stethoscope. The caption read, "My daughter says she wants to be just like Dr. Stevens when she grows up. She says Dr. Stevens is brave and smart and helps people. Thank you for being a role model." Jasmine stared at the photo for a long moment. This little girl had no idea about the bank incident, about the discrimination, about any of it. She just saw a doctor who looked like her, a successful black woman in medicine, someone to aspire to be. That was the real legacy of everything that had happened. Not the corporate policy changes or the donations or the news coverage. It was the little girls who now saw themselves in her. The young people who believed they could achieve their dreams despite the obstacles. The slowly shifting culture that made space for more voices, more perspectives, more possibilities. Jasmine finished her tea and got ready for bed. Tomorrow she had 2 surgeries scheduled, a board meeting for her nonprofit and dinner with Officer Chen and her family. Life continued, full and busy and meaningful. As she lay in bed, she thought about that Friday afternoon 6 months ago, walking into the bank with a legitimate check, being accused and humiliated, waiting for the police, the fear and anger and exhaustion of it all. If she could go back in time and avoid that whole situation, would she? The answer surprised her. No, because that terrible afternoon had sparked something. It had forced conversations that needed to happen. It had created changes that were long overdue. It had given her a platform to advocate not just for herself, but for everyone who faced similar treatment. She would not wish that experience on anyone. But she could not regret it either, because something good had grown from that painful moment, and that good would continue to ripple outward, touching lives in ways she might never fully know. Her phone buzzed one more time. A text from Sandra Chen, her lawyer. "New client, black business owner profiled at a store. Could use your support if you're willing." Jasmine typed back immediately. "I'm in. Let me know how I can help." Because that was the other thing that had come from all this, a responsibility, a commitment. She had a voice now, and people listened when she spoke. She could use that voice to help others who faced similar situations. She could be the support system she had been lucky enough to have. The work was far from over. Discrimination still happened. Bias still existed. The world still had a long way to go. But progress was being made. One difficult conversation at a time. One policy change at a time. One person at a time. And Jasmine Stevens, pediatric surgeon, nonprofit founder, and now reluctant activist, would keep pushing that door open wider. Not just for herself, but for every person who came after her. For the little girls in white coats with toy stethoscopes. For the young people who needed to see someone who looked like them succeeding. For the future that they were all building together, one small victory at a time. She turned off the light and closed her eyes, ready for whatever tomorrow would bring, because she was Dr. Jasmine Stevens, and she was just getting started.